Marketing is the tax you pay for not being remarkable.
People need scaffolding, and I think businesses need scaffolding. Building that scaffolding allows me to be the best version of myself, allows me to grow my business. Little bit where in the past people have not been good at asking for help. Now I think there's that little bit where how can we get the help we need to do what we're good at? And it becomes a great way of thinking, and sometimes we forget to think. And one of the things that I really like is fail fast.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is sometimes people are so afraid of failing that they don't even try. If you are going to fail fast.
Yeah.
And then on to the next thing. But don't be afraid of failure, because there's rich learning in that. I say don't be boring a lot. For me, it's a mantra and it's a challenge. Oh, that's the way we've always done it. Don't be boring. But that's the way we've always done it. Why?
This is Hospitality Huddles, bringing you the best conversations in hotel food and beverage.
Manage, lead, coach, repeat.
Every time I think of hospitality, I think of friendship. Hospitality allows you to be you.
Welcome to this week's episode of Hospitality Huddles, and this week I'm joined by the guy whose mantra is don't be boring. Richard, great to have you here on the show. A long time coming. Really excited about the chat.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be in this studio and chat about some of our favourite subjects.
Yeah, so today I've brought Richard to the Vorbos offices in East London to do the podcast recording, and if you've watched some of the other podcasts with Bal, you'll have seen where we are and how swanky it is, really, right?
It's a really impressive building, it's great to be in the studio rather than on Zoom,
isn't it?
It's
the
a real pleasant
much
change.
Better. Yeah, for sure. So, Richard, for those people who might not know you, do you want to just give a quick 60 seconds of who you are, what you do, and how you're helping people?
Yeah, it's a good question, that, because that's one of the first questions you asked me. And we had to change yours. And it's always interesting when you're doing work for other people, it's easier than doing it for yourself. I'm Richard. I run a business called Richard Solutions, and my job's to make people more amazing. That's it. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate what we do. Mine is to make people more amazing, and that's through consultancy, coaching, mentoring, branding. And I've got years and years of experience of working on all kinds of different brands, working for a design agency. And it's how can I use that thinking to help other people be more amazing. And had the great privilege of working with the Auden team, and hopefully, maybe I should get a baseball cap with making Auden amazing again.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do that. It was funny. What was it? Making Hotel F&B Great Again was one that I went with, and we were on the digital hospitality group, and Jason Berkowitz was like, Scott, kill that, start again. That's where Think Differently came from at the time. It's like, just kill it and cancel it. It's no good. Now, the clarity bit is really interesting though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I read Building a Brand Story, as we've talked about before, by Donald Miller, and he talks in there about how you should be able to get a 5-year-old to explain what you do really simply. Or in your mind, how do you explain what you do to a 5-year-old? So when I speak to my kids, it's like, Daddy builds restaurants in hotels, and they kind of get it. And that making people amazing is a great example of clarity and how it can be so simple.
And I think it was quite interesting, because I've only recently come to that conclusion, and I think there's this little bit where I really like the Donald Miller story brand. In fact, we should get an Amazon link to that and get some affiliate money on that. The amount of people that have now read that book. Yeah. Or they can listen to it free on Spotify Premium. Other listening streams are available. But
definitely use the affiliate link that we're about to put below.
We need one.
There's nothing like feeling the paper.
Do you know what would be fantastic about that? If Donald Miller hears this, and then it's like, well, can I come on your podcast to promote my book? And we're like, yes, if we can have an affiliate link. There's something about that little bit where it's always that nightmare thing where people say to you, what is it you do? What is it you do? And I think the Donald Miller book is fantastic. I also always refer people to Simon Sinek's Why.
Yeah.
And I think there's that little bit where lots of people do amazing things but don't know how to explain that. And if you can't explain it, how do you expect your customers to be able to understand it? And I think what's really interesting, whether it's businesses like ours or whether it's a hotel restaurant, I think sometimes that lack of clarity, not only does it confuse the customers, it confuses the staff, It confuses the whole community, and people wonder why things don't work. Yeah, but our product's great. But if you can't explain it, no one cares.
No. And then that's where all the dilution and everything else comes from it, because you're not busy, because people don't know what you are. And Donald Miller has this brilliant saying, and I quote it all the time, which is, if people have to burn too many calories to make a decision, they're going to move on.
Yes.
And that's the thing of clarity, isn't it?
And I agree with you there on the mental calories. I love that quote. But there's also a little bit where I work with a lot of businesses and they think they're the hero. You're not. Sorry, you're not the hero. You help the hero on their journey. And there's that little bit where when you look at your copy, when you look at your proposition, you're not the hero. What you do might be heroic, but you're not the hero. The hero is your customer. How do you help them on their journey? And whether it be B2B or whether you are a hotel restaurant or a hotel, how do you help the customer on their journey? That's the bit. They're the hero.
Yeah.
And I think there's that little bit where there are so many businesses I work with where they think that they're the hero, and you're like, no, you're not. What you do is heroic. There's a big difference.
So what is the difference? Because that is a really interesting one, right? It's because certainly when we've had conversations about hotel F&B and working on some of our projects that we're working with, we have almost two heroes, because we have the people we work for,
Correct.
Our guests, the person who's ultimately having to sell this thing in, and then we have the true hero, which is the guest. And fundamentally, if we hit the true hero, that then makes our hero look great. So we're complicating a bit, but
we are complicating.
Hero and heroic. What's the difference?
So my thought on this is, when you and I work together, for instance, you're the hero of the story, because it is a case of how can I make you more amazing? How can I help your business to be a true representation of what it is? So you're the hero of the story. The work that I do, you could argue, is heroic, but I'm not the hero of my story. I'm not the hero in this relationship. And I think what's really interesting when you work with lots of businesses, they think they're the hero. How many times have you been to a restaurant or to a retail store and all the staff are talking to each other and you can't get their attention because they're more important than you? That's the example, because they think they're the hero. And there's that little bit where in your journey, you are the hero going through your journey, but your journey is serving other people. And I think sometimes we forget that. So for me, as a business, you can do something heroic because you're helping people do something interesting, do something cool. How do you help them on their journey? And I always think of Daft Punk and go, harder, better, faster, stronger. I'm not going to sing. I know we're in the studio, but I'm not going to sing because it'd just be awful. But it's that harder, better, faster, stronger. And you start thinking about, how do you help people achieve their goals, or how do you help people on their journey? Helping them is heroic, but they are the hero. If that makes sense.
It does. And I think that's a really good way to put it. If we look at hotels, that guest is the hero, right? And you've got to produce the food, the ambience, the atmosphere, the beverage. That's the heroic element.
And if you think about their journey, they're coming to stay with you to relax or to chill out or because of something functional. How can you make that experience brilliant? And there's that little bit where sometimes we forget that, because so often I see this with businesses in all different sectors. We're so focused on the product. We're so focused on, this person's really important because they're this title in the business, or we need to make sure our product's absolutely perfect. Hang on a second. That doesn't pay the bills. The person who comes into the hotel, that's the person that pays the bills. That's the hero. How are you helping them on their journey?
I think it's interesting. We in a previous life, we worked with the VP of marketing for Chick-fil-A for 27 years. I've told you this story before, I think, but he was employee number 3 in Chick-fil-A, and he was talking all about how their big ethos, and it's not a secret, is how they could create raving fans from the people coming into their restaurants, so that those people became their best marketeers and then went out and did it. And I guess that's the bit, isn't it, of kind of, if you create those heroes that think you're that great that they become your best marketeers, That's the act of heroism that then gets these heroes being more than heroes. They then become ambassadors,
which is one of our favourite topics at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting. How do you create ambassadors? And we should probably put some context on that. When you do an amazing job for somebody, and they go and tell somebody else, oh, you need to work with this person, or you need to go to this restaurant, or you need to go here. So often we talk about know, like, and trust as a marketing concept. How do we get more people to know about us, like us, not in an Instagram sense, although it's always nice to get a like. And then there's that bit around trust. How do you really trust somebody that you're going to spend time or money with them? But then I think there's this next stage, and I've learnt this recently with some further studies I've done around the idea of those ambassadors, those people that go out and say, you need to stay here, it's amazing, and here's why. Oh, you need to talk to this person on the front desk. And there's that next level. And I think what's really interesting, we've kind of got a little bit confused with influencers and brand ambassadors in the paid sense. They're really, really useful, and they have a part in the marketing mix. But those true ambassadors, when you've really helped the hero on their journey, and they go, oh, you need to stay here because it's amazing. And how many times do you and I sort of go, oh, you need to go to this restaurant because of X, Y, and Z? Yeah. And I think it's that next level of trust and deep trust. And I think that's almost testament that not only is the product good, the proposition's good, and that you've helped a hero so much that they want to share you with their community. And I think that's that next level. And I think sometimes with the rush for sort of the paid side of it, we've forgotten this true organic side. And if you get it right, and there'll be people listening, and they'll be saying to themselves, we know who our ambassadors are. My challenge to you is, when was the last time you looked after them? When was the last time you spent some time with them?
I agree. One of the things David Salyers says, he's got a book called Remarkable. We'll put the affiliate link in there as well. But one of the things he says is marketing is the tax you pay for not being remarkable.
I could roll with that.
Which is a really interesting one, right? And it probably it came from the bit at the start about how they knew they were going to go up against McDonald's.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the marketing budget of McDonald's. So what could they do that was different to a McDonald's that could get the foot in, that then gave them the opportunity to start doing billboards and spending similar amounts of money? And I thought that phrase there of sometimes, especially in hotels where there's cash around because of bedrooms and bits and pieces, everyone reverts to marketing as a way to drive people in.
I think it's slightly lazy.
If you took yourself back and was like, if we had no money, this is my journey on Auden. I had no money. How can I sell Auden? How can I talk about Auden? Well, it's about giving value, and it was going on LinkedIn every day. That's the thing with Hotel F&B, is if you take out your big marketing budget with your money on agencies, money on marketing spend, Meta, Google, etc., and go, how would we act without that budget? All of a sudden you're going, how do we look after
And I think
guests?
this is the think differently. And one of the things I always say to people is don't be boring. And I think when it comes to think differently, there's also that little bit where I'm told you need to have money to be creative, and I think that's nonsense.
Yeah.
When you have no budget, you actually have to think really hard, differently about how you get that cut through. And I think there is this little bit of challenge where sometimes we go, well, actually, if we spend X, we'll get Y back. And I think that's become, and you need to do that.
Yeah.
I'm never going to go against marketing because that's my background. But there's also that little bit when you have no budget and you have to think differently. And I think there's that little bit where you get scrappy. And there's so many businesses that say, oh yeah, the startup phase was the most fun. Okay, well, how do you bring that mentality?
Yeah.
How do you bring that thinking into a business? And there's that little bit where, when was the last time you went out and talked to your customers? It's really old-fashioned. Actually physically go out and go and shake hands and go and talk to your customers. And people forget to do that. And there's so many things that you can do for free that make a really big difference. And I think there's a little bit where we've almost lost sight of that.
It's your favourite friend, Stephen Bartlett, they measure experiments, and the measure failure, and the learn. And I think one of the journeys I've probably had on through the three and a half years of Auden now is try, fail, start again, try, fail, start again. This is talking
I'd
about
say
like
fail
awareness and marketing, and like just try things and do things. And we're getting to a stage now where we can spend a bit more cash on marketing, but that whole piece around how that trying and failing and learning and moving on, not being emotional, is.
But I would push you. I
it?
always push you to go. Think back to those happy days where you didn't have the budget. You had to work hard with your thinking. And one of the things that I really like is fail fast.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is sometimes people are so afraid of failing that they don't even try. And I think there is that little bit where sometimes you do need to fail, but if you are going to fail fast.
Yeah.
And then on to the next thing. But don't be afraid of failure, because there's rich learning in that. And I think there's that little bit where sometimes we aim for perfection. You're never going to achieve that. And if you're aiming for perfection, you're not trying to move things along. You're going to fail. So why not try some things? And if they work, great. And if they don't, you learn from it, move on to the next thing.
Yeah. What does it mean to not be boring? And why is it important?
So it was really funny. I went to a rebranding a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I had pointed out to me was I say, don't be boring a lot. And for me, it's a mantra and it's a challenge. And it really is a challenge to people, because I think there's always something interesting in every business. Every business. And even my accountant, I love you, Justin. I have an interesting accountant. Where it becomes a challenge to businesses is, well, why? Oh, that's the way we've always done it. Don't be boring. But that's the way we've always done it. Why? So I'm interested in the bits that work well, but I'm also there to challenge you, because if your business is doing so well, where's your growth? What's going on? Like, really? And I think that for me, don't be boring is a challenge to people. It's a challenge to say, well, actually, could it be even better? Oh, it's absolutely perfect the way it is. Really? Really? And I think sometimes you need to challenge people in their thinking. And so often, businesses of all sizes, but that's the way we've always done it. And it's just, it makes you cringe. And I remember you and I having a bit of a rant session talking about breakfast buffets and rubber eggs. And then that whole challenge where you were saying, and you were saying, how many hotels have said to you, but that's the way we've always done it. Why? And I think for me, don't be boring is almost a really simple way of challenging people to go, oh, okay, is that right? Maybe not.
Yeah, it's the worst phrase in hotel food and beverage right now, the way we've always done it.
It's dangerous.
It's time to change. You can see this. You can see how the market's changing. You can see how the guest is changing. So if we don't evolve and we don't question, then we're just going to lose people. I said, I was walking around Mayfair yesterday, an hour and a half. The busiest place in Mayfair was a personal training gym that did the IVs and things like that. They had a healthy cafe, and there was people sitting there with matcha lattes, and it was the busiest place in Mayfair. And it just that's the people aren't going out for boozy lunches anymore. They're going for a salad and a matcha in a cafe instead. And I think that's where we've got to kind of evolve that whole message. Otherwise, we're not appealing to the next. We can't keep holding on to the last generation.
When we think about things moving on and changing, in the 80s, most UK cities had a Wimpy.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a reality that the market moves and people change and evolve. But that's the way we've always done it. And I think what's really interesting is go and watch the Blackberry film. Because when the iPhone launched, Blackberry went, but that's the way we've always done it.
Not many people.
Nobody uses a Blackberry now.
No.
And I think that's almost, for me, a really good example. It's evolve or die. Don't be boring.
There you go. Now, I'm going to reel off some brands now which people might suddenly go, hang on a minute. Nike, Godiva and Jack Daniels. Some of the brands that you've worked with over your career when you're working in the marketing agency. You've told me lots of stories about this, about working for some of these brands, and I think there's some amazing learnings that people can take away. So if I've said those three brands, but pick out one or two examples of how you've not been boring and made a change with some of those, because I think there's some really good ones in there that will sit with people.
I'd like to tell the story on Nike,
Yeah.
and this was the work of the guy I worked for, Mike Ratcliffe, who's sadly no longer with us, and somebody that I hugely look up to and respect. And Nike came to him with a brief for the World Cup in South Africa, and it was really interesting because Adidas were the official sponsor. And after the World Cup, they did a survey and said, who was the official sponsor? Nike got 51%, Adidas got 49%. And that was in Marketing Week. And what was really interesting about that was the amount of money Adidas had spent on the sponsorship deal. And Nike came to Mike and said, right, here's a space in Johannesburg where the final was. And their brief was do something cool. Which, when it comes to a brief, is the best brief in the world and the worst brief in the world at the same time. And we've all had those moments where you're like, oh gosh, what are we going to do with this? And he built, out of 5,500 footballs, a sculpture of a footballer. Now, what was really interesting was lots of people were going down the digital route, but he actually looked at the local market and went, actually, digital smartphones were not as prominent in 2010 as they are now. So he built this sculpture, and it had 1.5 million visitors. 1.5 million. They had AstroTurf underneath it. We had to replace it twice because of the amount of footfall on it. What was really interesting, got picked up by TV, PR, radio. It went absolutely everywhere. It's been in magazines, it was nominated for awards. But the reason why I loved it was everything was recycled. All the footballs were positioned in a way, these mini training balls, they were given to local school kids to inspire the next generation. But it was literally one of those jaw-dropping moments. I think what I learned from that was, how can you do something jaw-dropping? How can you do something cool? And I think sometimes we do this rush to, and there is this rush to go, right, what's the return on investment? And I realise it's Nike. So Nike don't necessarily need to go, well, what's the absolute return on investment? And I'm sure that somebody from Nike would go, well, actually we do. But there's that little bit where just by doing something cool, it generated conversation. And I think sometimes we forget about how do we generate conversation, or how do you create conversational currency? How do you get people talking about you? And what was amazing about this was people were talking about it everywhere. At the World Cup, on across media, and then just to have that impact. And what was really interesting, the ROI was, who won the World Cup that year, Nike or Adidas? Well, Nike won, because they're a little bit rebellious. You know, Adidas were doing all the official stuff, and Nike went, should we just do something cool that will resonate and connect with consumers? And I think the lesson from that is, if everybody else is playing by the rules, how can you bend the rules and do something interesting that people talk about you? And every business listening to this will have competitors. So how do you do something that makes you stand out, that tells a story? And I think that was what was so impressive about the Nike sculpture. I mean, don't get me wrong, when you looked at it, it was stunning. But it was actually the thinking behind it. You know, how can you be disruptive? And I think it's sometimes that word is misunderstood, because people think of disruption as in like a business like Airbnb or Uber. But actually, how can you disrupt people's thinking? How can you disrupt people's journeys? And Nike did that over and over again in that campaign. So it was an amazing thing to, you know, watch being created. But it was the thinking behind it that I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. I love that story. And I think the bit about how it then goes to helping the next generation, all of a sudden there's all these Nike footballs across South Africa.
5,500.
He's creating brand loyalty that's kind of giving people opportunity. That's almost a stronger message as the...
Well, we were talking about how do you get new fans into a brand. And I remember probably 2003, 2004, I was at Sainsbury's, and they had the ad agency in called AMV. And AMV, very well-known London agency, did all the famous Guinness ads. And they posed a really interesting question, that everyday Guinness drinkers were dying, and not because of Guinness, but because of old age.
Yeah.
How do they get the next generation of Guinness drinkers in? And I think there's this little bit as a business, how do you bring in the next generation of consumers, the next generation of customers, fans, hopefully ambassadors? And I think sometimes we focus so much on like what we currently have, we don't look at the future. And I think one of the things that AMV lesson taught me was, okay, how, from a brand perspective, how do you think about the future? And when you talk about travellers all the time, as you do, what travellers want and need is changing. That traditional, well, here's a bedroom, here's your room service, away you go. The modern traveller's changing. And if you don't take that into account, then you're going to end up like Blackberry.
Yeah, that's a really good, that's a perfect message at the end. Now, one of the bits that struck with me the most when you first presented this idea to me and this concept to me was the shopping centre. And hotel F&B is complex. It's funny, I told you, Bal sat with me the other week, and his background is obviously QSR and bits and pieces, and he said to me, it's amazing how many different things a hotel F&B has to be. And when I thought about that, you've got your restaurants, you've got your lounges, you've got your conference, you've got your room service, you've got your spas, there's so much that goes into it. The concept of the shopping centre, I believe, is a perfect one for any F&B leader who might be listening to this now to sit down and do this exercise for their space to understand the priorities and maybe the amenities and etc. etc. I don't want to spoil it. Over to you. Tell people about the shopping centre, because this is brilliant.
It came out of creating an analogy. I love an analogy.
Yeah.
I should probably make an analogy about an analogy. Go full Christopher Nolan on it. But I think a business is like a shopping centre. So if we think about a shopping centre, we have an anchor tenant. So it might be a couple of department stores at either end of a shopping centre, or shopping mall for our North American friends. So you've got the anchor tenants at either end. And then within that, you might have other shops that you go to, those large stores, whether it be a sports store, fashion store, a chemist, beauticians, whatever it is. Then you might have like a food court in the centre, and you've got all of those different shops. And if you think about the black line that goes all the way around it, that holds it all together. Now, if you go into a shopping centre, you might go into both department stores, you might go to the food court. But what's really interesting as a consumer, that black line that goes all the way around it, the actual shopping centre. So if I'm in the Westfield, I'm in the Westfield. I don't, and it's all the things that tie it together, whether it's the ambience, the atmosphere. Now, for me, that black line that goes right the way around it, as a brand, that's your DNA, that's what it is you stand for. The revenue you may get comes from those different places, but from the consumer perspective, it's all just one hotel or one shopping centre. And I think what's really interesting is when you understand that, it can help you prioritise, it can help you do your strategy, but it also can help explain it. So if your shopping centre is all about luxury, quality, etc., then it helps explain it to the consumers that come in and all of those different elements. But you have to make sure all the different shops within your shopping centre equal your proposition, otherwise you can confuse the consumer. And I think what's really interesting, people sometimes look at their business and go, oh, we just do X. Well, actually, no, you don't. You're a shopping centre. And I think about it from my business's perspective. I don't just do coaching and mentoring, I do consultancy, I do occasionally training, I deliver workshops, all of those different things. It doesn't matter what shop people enter, they're still working with me, Richer Solutions, and they're still working with my brand values. And I think what's really fascinating is when you understand that DNA, when you understand all the different shops in it, then you can start thinking about, okay, how do we talk to people about it? Or if we've only got people, let's take a hotel example, they're only staying in the bedrooms. Well, why aren't they going into the other department store, which is food and beverage? Why isn't that? How do we get them to move around the shopping centre? And all of a sudden it becomes a great strategy document, and it becomes a great way of thinking. And sometimes we forget to think. And within that shopping centre, there's all those opportunities. And as a business, we need to think about how we activate that.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well, which is what we found when we were doing my shopping centre, was actually there was too many anchors that almost needed to go, which one are the true anchors and which ones are maybe the sub elements that they're coming through the top, and they might be the bits that you can add on, but it's not necessarily what you want to drive and confuse. So I think we went from 6 to 2, and then the others ended up being almost like the
small
extras
shops,
that sits, and we've actually narrowed it down even further. And I think about that for hotel F&B, because I look at it and go, sometimes the restaurant isn't your anchor, but it's needed and it needs to sit there and you need to talk about it, but maybe it shouldn't get as much prominence as the bar, because that's truly what is the anchor of where you're going to drive revenue through. And I think that's the interesting bit about that exercise, is you can really ask yourself, what are your anchors? What are the ones that are supporting? And then as it goes further down into maybe the ones that are room service, that's the ones then. And then when you give that to marketing, you give that to chef, you give that to whoever, all of a sudden then everyone goes, that's the important one, and this is how it goes down the chain of command type thing. And I think it's a really interesting exercise.
Isn't it? And I think the way you talked about it from a prioritisation perspective is very, very interesting. And I think sometimes, we can put a load of focus on a small shop that doesn't actually do anything for us, and we can ignore an anchor tenant. And I think about some of those things that hotel restaurants do, that they put all their social media and all their focus and attention on. But if you're only doing 100 covers a week out of it, well, what's the point? Actually, are you missing that opportunity on the bar? And I think sometimes it's quite a brutal exercise. And I've done it with lots and lots of people where they've gone, do you know what, I need to close that. Or I was working with one person that went, actually, I need to open a new department store, because actually I've got all of this talent within the company if I use it in a different way. And I think sometimes we're so busy working on the day-to-day that the shopping centre exercise can be a mixture of both day-to-day but also that long-term strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And the next one I think is a great follow-on from that. And you talk a lot about personal and business scaffolding. So what does it mean, and how can it help anyone? You work with small businesses like we are to an extent, but I think it can be transcended as well into an individual working in a bigger organisation. So what does it mean by scaffolding?
I love scaffolding, and I think it probably because I remember going to Hong Kong and seeing bamboo scaffolding, think that can't be safe.
No. Yeah.
You just look at it and you're like, really?
And when you watch them doing it, it's just phenomenal, isn't it?
It is amazing.
They tie it together and everything.
But what scaffolding is there is to help buildings grow. And the way that I see it is that people need scaffolding, and I think businesses need scaffolding. So if you had every single bit of expertise in your business, fantastic, amazing, but very unlikely. And I think for me, scaffolding is providing you with the right support that you can grow as a business. Now, a lot of people are beginning to use AI as scaffolding. It could be using consultants. It could be reading market reports. It could be lots and lots of different things. I think from a personal perspective, what can help you grow as an individual? And you can be in a small business or a large business, it doesn't matter. And scaffolding can be as simple as, I don't know, before recording a podcast, having a cup of tea because it calms the nerves. I'm talking from experience here. But there's also that little bit where scaffolding could be a little bit of AI that you use to make sure your emails are really good. A little bit of scaffolding could be, okay, what is it that I need to hit my goals and objectives? What are those little hints, tips and tricks? And some of us are already doing it. And then there's other ways where you think, how can I improve it? So when I look at my own scaffolding this year, I've gone back to university to improve my training and my skills. That's personal scaffolding. There's other bits where if I have to do some tasks that I find quite difficult, such as my accounts, I might at the end of it give myself a reward. And that reward could be from buying concert tickets or a new pair of shoes to a cornetto. It could be whatever you want it to be. But building that scaffolding allows me to be the best version of myself, allows me to grow my business. And I think this is a little bit where in the past people have not been good at asking for help. Now I think there's that little bit where how can we get the help we need to do what we're good at? How can we get the help that we need, i.e. scaffolding, that we can grow our businesses and ourselves? And I think it's such a simple concept, and to each individual it would be different, the scaffolding they need, but the benefits of it are amazing.
I think it's a brilliant one. I really do, and I think it really helps anyone who's there now in the day-to-day grind. Just maybe stepping back and doing a bit of celebration, which doesn't hurt sometimes, does it? To just kind of sit and go, what have I achieved? What have I done well? And how do I reward myself? I think is a really nice way to look at it, isn't it? In terms of doing that.
I always joke that every month I win Employee of the Month. It's just one of those joys of having your own business. But there's those little things where sometimes we get so busy, and to quote one of the great philosophers of the 1980s, Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. Sometimes you need to stop and have a good look round, otherwise it might pass you by. And I think there is that little bit where we're so good at helping other people, we're so good at doing work for other people. Sometimes we need to stop and look at what we've achieved and to really celebrate those moments, because it produces that kind of endorphins and it has that positive mindset. It's not about, I don't know, rewarding yourself for every single thing you've done, because that'd just be crazy. But it is looking at, okay, what have you achieved? What have you done well? And it's the same as when you've done a good service. You just know. And I think there's that little bit where all of these little actions build to create that positive momentum. That's scaffolding. And again, if anybody's read Atomic Habits by James Clear, again, we need an affiliate link for that.
We do. Yeah, we're going to rack up this.
We are going to rack them up. But he talks about the British cycling team.
Yeah.
And the British cycling team are incredible. They've won so many golds. And they talked about when Dave Brailsford came in and took it on and really pushed it to the next level, they went, how can we do 101% improvements? And that could be from diet, it could be from lighting, it could be from the suits to the helmet, all of these little gains, marginal gains. Now the reward was gold medal after gold medal after gold medal, but the rewards was also seeing people's performance improve. And I think there's all of these little things that when we become so busy, we need to celebrate and not forget what they were.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The next one is about being uncomfortable. So we've celebrated our success. We've rewarded ourselves with copious amounts of cornetos because we're so happy with what we've achieved. How important is it to keep pushing yourself and keep doing the bits that make you feel uncomfortable and scare you a little bit? Because I think this is one of the things that when I do something and I set my mind to it, I try and achieve it, and it's like, okay, great, what's next? What's the next thing that can do? Like, for a business owner, a leader, anyone doing like that continual journey for yourself, how important is it, and what tips would you give business owners to try and keep doing that side of
So you're talking about being uncomfortable, and I think what's really interesting is when you get comfy, it's quite dangerous. And you and I had a conversation when you're at your busiest, you're at your most vulnerable. I think there's a little bit when you're comfortable, you're vulnerable as well. And I think I heard a great quote, never be the smartest person in the room. And I think there is that little bit where, how can you be pushing yourself?
Yeah.
And I think it's, and it doesn't have to be training in the academic sense. It could be reading, it could be listening to podcasts, it could be all of these different things. If you're comfortable like that, that's a nice moment. But I think you need to get comfortable in being uncomfortable. I think the only certainty now post-pandemic is uncertainty. And I think that when you start getting uncomfortable, when you start looking at, okay, what are the big trends that are happening at the moment? How are we adapting to these? Because if you're not, we go back to the old Blackberry analogy. And I think there's that little bit as people, how can we get used to being uncomfortable? How can we get used to uncertainty? How can we get used to pushing ourselves to be better? And there's lots of different ways to achieve that. But I think if you stop doing that, that's where you become Blackberry.
Last question.
Go on.
What's the secret to keeping a brand fresh and relevant over the period of time?
There is no secret. It's really, really old-fashioned. And I think sometimes people are always looking for the secret, but the only secret is Colonel Sanders' recipe. The actual part of keeping your brand relevant and fresh is actually looking all the time at what are you doing, how are you evolving. And I think if you look at all of the great global brands that have been around for 100 plus years, the likes of Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels, Levi's, what have they done to evolve? What have they done to keep the same and have that kind of stability? But have they stayed fresh and relevant? And I think there's that little bit where you have to keep asking yourself that. And it's almost, you can't stand still. You've got to look at what's going on. You've got to look at what resonates with people. And I think there's always that challenge. What are your blind spots? And you've got to keep asking questions. And it's when people stop asking questions, stop thinking, that's when you stand still. And I think there's lots of people that are looking for that kind of secret sauce for keeping your brand fresh. It's really old-fashioned. It's hard work. It is literally hard work, graft.
And stop, start, continue feels like it's a pretty good exercise to introduce to people here. I know I said one last question, but anyway, this is one that actually I've started doing probably every 6 months, maybe every quarter probably actually. But we did a big one with Bal last week on this, like start, stop, continue, and what have you. And I think this is back to that point about looking and observing, is taking that time to sit down and run this exercise. So do you want to tell more people about it?
It's really, really simple exercise, but it's incredibly helpful. And again, you can do this for your business, or you can do this with your teams. And stop, start, continue is just a really simple way of thinking about business. 3 things to stop doing. And it's one of those ones where people are like, what do you mean stop doing? And it's like, well, that's the way we've always done it. Stop doing that straight away. Stop. What do you need to stop doing as business? Then there's 3 things where I'd challenge you, say, right, what do you need to start doing? And I know when we think about podcasting, or we think about putting ourselves out there on social media, I know you've had a really big push on that, and that starting it can often be a hard thing to do. But when you start thinking about it as a business and as an individual, what are 3 things you need to start doing? But then there's also 3 things that you're probably doing well that you need to continue doing. And I always challenge people, okay, well, the 3 things that are going really well at the moment, how can you continue doing that? And again, you could use the same model with the evolution of a brand. You could use the same model with your team's performance, and you can use the same model with your business. And it's so simple. 3 things to stop doing, start doing, continue doing. And I think when you start using these models, it really helps you with your strategy, your day-to-day, and how you can improve yourself. And again, we go back to the idea of business scaffolding. This is a nice piece of scaffolding for people to use.
For sure. So if people want to learn more, see more, and get some of the free resources we've talked about in here, which we'll put the link, it's not an affiliate link, but we'll definitely put links to it. Where can they find you, and how can they do it?
I love talking to people. So look me up on LinkedIn, it's Richard Liverman. My business is Richard Solutions. On Instagram, it's Richard Solutions Global. And there's also a YouTube channel that I'm working on at the moment.
Big news.
Yes, so there's lots of little bits and pieces. My website is richardsolutions.com. Just have a conversation.
And get some of the free resources.
Yes, we can send that. We can put the links out for that.
Definitely put the links out for that. Richard, thank you very much. Really enjoyed this. We don't often get to sit down and have serious conversations like this.
Do you know, it's quite nice not to do this on Zoom.
Isn't it?
It's nice to do this in person.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think it's a challenge to lots of businesses to go out and talk to people and have conversations. And you can do this on a podcast. Why not?
There you go. Have conversations. This is Richard. We're in Vauboss offices. See you soon.